Hi, this is Kasian, and it's time for our weekly conference call at VectorspaceAI. We'll start with what's happening around the globe. World food prices have hit a 10-year peak, according to Reuters and the FAO, or the Rome-based Food and Agricultural Organization. Goldman Sachs cuts forecast for U.S. economic growth in 2021 and 2022. The IMF slashes U.S. growth forecast and warns of rising risks to the global economy. Bloomberg reports that Apple finally falls victim to never-ending supply chain crisis. Quoting, Apple, the world's most valuable company, has finally joined a growing list of household names from Toyota to Samsung, forced to cut back on business because of a global shortage in semiconductors. BTC is trading at 59K, and ETH is in a range of 3,800, and the Dow is at 34.9. On the industry side, Bloomberg is reporting that the SEC is set to allow Bitcoin futures ETFs as deadline looms. Continuing, the Securities and Exchange Commission is poised to allow the first U.S. Bitcoin futures exchange-traded fund to begin trading in a watershed moment for the cryptocurrency industry, according to people familiar with the matter. Singularity Hub reports Microsoft's massive new language AI is triple the size of OpenAI's GPT-3. And VentureBeat reports Microsoft and NVIDIA team up to train one of the world's largest language models. Continuing, inside Microsoft's Project Turing, the team that's quietly reinventing how it develops advanced AI to move faster and take on rivals like Google. Project Turing is Microsoft's research and development team for large language models. The team builds flexible algorithms that are sent to other organizations or sold as cloud products. Next, we have healthcare and IT news. NLP powers clinical concept extraction, medical QA, and more at the University of Florida Health. Continuing, two scientists from University of Florida Health offer a deep dive look at how they're training Gatortron, their leading natural language processing model, with billions of words for an array of EHR and analytics use cases. Brain injury after long-duration spaceflight. This is reported by physics.org, and there is a connection to Space Biosciences, obviously, related to the brain ECM, or brain extracellular matrix, as heavy ion particles can cause a disturbance within your brain when it comes to judgment and decision-making processes. On a related note, a more positive note, William Shatner has made it into space, October 13th. This is when Blue Origin successfully launched the Star Trek star, Captain James T. Kirk, into space. And it would be interesting for anyone that would like to know how the experience went for him to dig up his words that he shared with Jeff Bezos on that day. Next, we have Planet Labs. And Planet Labs is another satellite launching company. They also collect a lot of data. And satellites are generating more data than, well, let's just mention that it's exponentially increasing. And the CEO of Planet Labs quotes, "The world is in need of these new data sets. Everyone is talking about AI. It's powered by these new data sets, and especially when we're trying to transition to a sustainable economy. Data sets from space help us do that." Unquote. Next, we've got themes and events. CNBC is reporting that China isn't the only huge Asian economy with a coal shortage now. Our next theme, hedge funds snap up uranium in a bet on green energy shift. And you can find these themes and their related components, stocks, associated to those themes in our Thematic Baskets channel. You can also find a demo of the generation of thematic baskets based on our new data engineering pipeline. That demo includes new visualizations. On the corp side, we are interviewing crypto-friendly U.S. banking partners as we establish capital accounts and operating accounts. We are also working with our legal team to establish PPMs, or private placement memorandums, which should be available in just a matter of days at this point. And we're continuing to look for new office space with a wet lab, or at least the ability to build out a wet lab. And this is hard to find close to campus, close to University of California of Berkeley, and close to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. But we do have a solution in place. We'll keep the public updated. Next, we'll move on to engineering, product, QA, and ops. We have a focus on gene ontology. Ontologies are part of the foundation. They might be considered a pillar of natural language processing and natural language understanding and natural language generation. When it comes to biomedical data, or when it comes to data, scientific literature repositories related to data and papers connected to molecular biology, gene ontology is critically important. Our engineers are getting familiar with geneontology.org. And gene ontology is a way to understand parent-child relationships between biological terms. Those parent-child relationships are represented as a graph. In some cases, part of it is represented as a cyclic graph, a DAG. And of course, this was before DAGs became popular in crypto. Continuing under engineering, product, QA, and ops. I should also mention that gene ontology will be forming the basis, along with scientific literature bodies, which we consider data sources, as we move forward with our scientific and academic collaborators, which we'll talk more about in a bit. So continuing under engineering, product, QA, and ops, we've got Morningstar and preparing thematic baskets related to global events in real time for Morningstar's notebook and dataset offerings. We had a meeting with them, which we'll talk about also in a bit. And we're continuing our work on the legal deposition summary side. And of course, one of the most important things we're doing is comparing the returns generated based on our legacy experimental data engineering pipelines compared to the new data engineering pipelines we are building. Once we beat those returns from the legacy data engineering pipelines, then we'll be fully good to go on data engineering pipelines offered to all customers and partners, including Morningstar. So essentially, that just means that we look at the returns of some of our most popular themes, like the coronavirus before we called it COVID-19, and GameStop. We're looking at FDA approvals related to Alzheimer's and their associated thematic baskets. So the legacy experimental data engineering pipeline has produced returns, which those are well documented. We've given those to the public. They are available on channels that we have, public channels. We posted them before. But we are comparing those now with the new thematic baskets being generated based on our new data engineering pipelines. And the objective, of course, is to have two teams here. And one team working on the new system, will optimize that until it beats the old system. And that right there would be considered a core data science optimization issue, which is solved often. It does take time. Under customers, partners, and collaborators. First, we'll start with Space Biosciences. And it would be important to remember that under Space Biosciences, on one side we've got scientific and academic collaborators, and on another side we've got commercial and industry partners and customers. So first, we'll start with University College of London, and everything has been finalized. We are now waiting for the agreements, which we will sign. Everything's been approved in terms of the draft agreements, and those agreements represent our collaboration proposals in space medicine, space biosciences. They actually have a space medicine department, and this will also include establishing a curriculum for space biosciences, which we've talked about in the past. And of course, our work with University College of London is going to be published, talked about. So University College London will be talking to the public about our collaboration. In a few weeks after we sign the agreements with them, it's not just a matter of signing an agreement and then the next day you've got PR all over the place. That's not how it works. We work to strategically magnify our PR, especially this kind of PR, which represents an extremely high quality form of PR. Not a marketing campaign. Next, we've got ICL, and this would be Imperial College of London. And we had a meeting with the Bruce Lab there related to our collaboration agreement. And I will just mention I'll quote a paragraph here from the collaboration proposal. And let me just also mention that it is finalized, and this is the meat here, the import of what is finalized. And it reads, our goal is to find other hidden connections in this pathway, and that would be the cardiolipin pathway. With the longer term goal of mapping out as much as possible of the mitochondrial interactome to find new therapeutic strategies in longevity research and with extension to space biosciences research. We are working with collaborators to build a molecular level 3D model of a mitochondrion. So longevity research is something that we've specialized in for some time. That's how we started at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and that's when we co-authored the paper with Michael I. Jordan and David Blee, Cybermian, and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, related to genes that were extending the lifespan of nematodes to what is equivalent to 300 years in human lifespan. So this work has been ongoing, and this of course has a direct connection to space biosciences. And in particular, if there are any molecular biologists listening in, we will be working on the nucleoside diphosphate kinase D and kinase A. And the Roos Lab is actually focused on NDPKD, which is nucleoside diphosphate kinase D, and mitochondrial fitness. When you look at NDPKC, that has to do with mitochondrial fusion, along with cardiolipin. And when you look at NDPKA, that connects directly to space biosciences. Because that represents NDPKA is a protein that assists in the pathway in repairing DNA, or repairing what are called non-homologous end joining. And this is when you have a double-stranded break based on a heavy ion particle high charge, high energy particle called HZE particles, along with galactic cosmic rays, knocking against both strands of your DNA. And if they don't get repaired properly, then you will have cancer. And that's what we are solving for right now, is to try to understand how to prevent precancerous activity like that. So the Roos Lab will be sending a finalized agreement, and just as with the University College of London, Imperial College of London also has a PR department, and they're going to be talking to the world about our collaboration. Because it's not small potatoes. This is very critically important stuff for the human race, which means a direct connection to not only personalized medicine, but solutions for cancer therapeutics. And we have a new collaborator in the pipeline. That would be the University of Manchester, also connected to Space Biosciences and climate. Now, on the industry side of things, on the commercial side of things, related to Space Biosciences, we have had a conversation with Azure Space this week. And Azure Space is in its infancy. This is why it's taking a little longer than anticipated. They're still architecting the way Azure Space is going to be presented to the general public. But one thing that is going to be happening here is we're going to be on the Azure Government Cloud as we deal with government agencies and for security purposes. And again, just to reiterate, the Azure Space relationship for us, part of it is hinged on the HP Spaceborne Computer 2. That's where we've been invited to conduct a few experiments. And we will be talking with the Roos Lab. Well, we've already talked with the Roos Lab about the experiments with Azure Space and HP's Spaceborne Computer 2. So they're gearing up to understand what it's going to take to design an experiment for that machine that gets launched into space on the ISS for 2 hours, or gets launched to the ISS, and for 2 hours every day experiments are run. And we have also talked this week with Maston Space Systems. They are a long-time launching group that is interested in launching our payload. And we are talking with them about the kind of payload that we want to launch. And that includes requirements and dimensions. And it just so happens that those requirements and dimensions are going to be very similar to the HP Spaceborne Computer 2. Because we're in negotiation in terms of understanding what it's going to take to have our own HP Spaceborne Computer 2. One that we purchase, one that we then provide Maston Space Systems with for a launch date. 2024 is when we are scheduled. And that's going to require a letter of intent or memorandum of understanding, and we are working with them on getting that done. So, of course, we'll be talking about what we're doing with Maston Space Systems far ahead of 2024. So we can certainly let the public know how things are going there in just a short while. Next, we've got the financial markets, and we're still under customers, partners, and collaborators here. So under the financial markets, our offerings under the financial markets include offerings to Morningstar and S&P Global. On the Morningstar side, we've had a chance to meet with them this week, and we'll be meeting with them next week as well. But first, this week's meeting went pretty well. We demoed what we had to offer in terms of the thematic basket generator that we also demoed at the trading show in Chicago. And they liked what they saw. More importantly, they gave us an inside look into, a private look into their current notebook offering. And that would include access to Datasets, but it's an actual Python Jupyter notebook where they have what's called an analytics lab, which they haven't released to the public yet. They're still designing it, and they'd like to include us in that analytics lab and notebook offering. So we talked about revenue sharing, so we're going to be working with them on revenue sharing, and that would include working with them scaling into revenue based on institutional customers they have. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Morningstar as we move on here. But first, let's talk about S&P Global. We've been talking with S&P Global, as many of you know, for a long time here. And S&P Global moves a lot slower than Morningstar. Morningstar knows us. They've known us for 20 years. Mike Muldoon and I, our current CTO, got our start refactoring code at a company called Empower, which was eventually bought by Morningstar. We refactored their Monte Carlo simulations and TCL and a few other languages, and it was good enough for the acquisition to go through. So we have a good rep with Morningstar, and they act pretty quick compared to S&P Global. We are going to continue with S&P Global, and that would mean continuing to work with them on our dataset offering. Now, we are first going to execute with Morningstar. Another reason for that is that S&P Global is not as familiar with our group as Morningstar. And their confidence level in our data sets is not as confident as Morningstar's. When you talk about what we do with data sets, which is the tip of the spear in AI and ML, which is what we always say, when it comes to natural language understanding, there are groups out there, old brick and mortar groups, that are just now getting into NLP and have yet to grasp what NLU is, or even a correlation matrix data set. So it takes a lot of explaining, a lot of back and forth, and in fact takes them hiring engineers to understand what we do. Now Morningstar doesn't have to do that, but S&P does. So the road that we trek up with S&P Global is a long road, but we will not be ignoring the reach that S&P Global has. Morningstar has a great reach as well, both publicly traded companies, and both have been servicing the financial markets for decades. I think over 100 years for S&P Global. When you look at what we want to do with S&P Global, we're going to be doing that after we work with Morningstar, but it's in the pipeline. We've also been talking, now we're still under customers, partners, and collaborators, and we consider smart partners investment groups. So occasionally we'll have a section here related to investment groups. And there's been an investment group, there's been more than one that have contacted us, and sometimes we'll mention them, sometimes we won't. In this case, we will mention a group called Telescope. They have 1 foot in crypto and 1 foot in the traditional VC arena, which is based on the fact that they are a spin-off from Sequoia. And if you don't know who Sequoia is, you can look them up. One of the most popular VC firms in the Valley. In fact, we talked with Sequoia years ago, and they have now established this Telescope group and have been around for 5 years operating Telescope. So our conversations have just started with Telescope, so we'll see how it goes. Next, we've got Corp Dev, Biz Dev, Sales and Marketing. Back to Morningstar. Morningstar is the best sales and marketing arm we can have. We'd recommend getting an understanding of their notebook and analytics lab offering. You can look up their notebook offering using Google. Just look at the press release, you'll understand what they're doing there. And then in time, they will announce their analytics lab offering. And they mentioned before 2021 ends, so that's the best timing we can give you on that. They also mentioned that there is demand across the board for real-time thematic baskets based on global events by their institutional customers, including exchanges, which we talked about. It's very important to remember that Morningstar has access to just about every financial institution in the world. And there's a reason that they do. They hold sway and pull when it comes to financial information sources and their ability to acquire. And of course, when it comes to corporate development, business development, and sales and marketing, you can add S&P Global as well. S&P Global's coverage and reach across the world's financial institutions is greater than just about any other organization out there. And that makes them a primary target for us when it comes to a revenue sharing distribution agreement of our data sets. Again, if you can access the world's financial institutions through a group like S&P Global, that's exactly what you do, and that's what we are doing. And we will be treating them, as they invited us to, as their sales and marketing arm. Now, that does not mean we are not looking to grow our own internal sales and marketing group, and we will provide updates on that in the future here. We will also be hiring a chief marketing officer, and just so that everyone knows, when you operate a technology startup, your CMO is one of the last C-level people that you hire. You certainly take advantage of outside sales and marketing channels. Next, we'll move on to the exchanges side of things. What we can say is that everything is in progress. What does that mean? We've used that term before. In this case, what that means is that KuCoin, a group we've been talking with, along with a few other exchanges, KuCoin has been fully approved, and what that means is that they have all our documentation, everything's been signed off and approved. That's done. Now, we'll provide you with some details here, instead of just leaving it at it's in progress. What we won't do, though, is provide you with a date. Even if we had a date, we wouldn't provide you with a date. There's no buying on the rumor and selling on the news with us. What we can say is that KuCoin asked for $100,000 USD in VXV. So $100K worth of VXV. Now, we negotiated that down to zero. That's what we've been spending time doing, because we protect our stakeholders. We do not allow exchanges to dump on our holders. We're a little more savvy than that. And we've been around the block when it comes to Wall Street and the financial markets. And marketing campaigns offered by exchanges pale in comparison to what Morningstar and S&P Global can do, or Azure SpaceX, or University College of London, or Imperial College of London. We don't need marketing campaigns by exchanges. That's not how you grow a company. You grow a company based on real, powerful value, long-lasting, long-game value. Value that connects to revenue. We're not in it for the pennies. We're in it for the pounds. So with KuCoin, now that we've negotiated that down to zero, all else is good to go. They'll be in touch with us next week, and that's all that we're going to give you for now on that. Under exchanges, we can also say that it would be wise for anyone in the crypto industry to understand who Barry Silbert is. Founder of GBTC, maybe you've heard of it. Also, before GBTC, founder of Second Market. You should look that up. One of the reasons is that Second Market wasn't an exchange. It was an exchange just like CoinMetro is an exchange that is not a top-tier exchange, but an exchange that's very powerful otherwise. Second Market, established by Barry Silbert, traded Facebook from pennies up to $1.50, down to 75 cents, up to $2.50, up to $4.50, back down to $1.50, and then up to $44 without being listed on NYSE or NASDAQ. $44 is what they traded on Second Market. And when Facebook decided to list, that's when they were pawned off to investment bankers on Wall Street from Silicon Valley. And then, of course, we know where they are today, but that's a different story. When you look at publicly traded companies, U.S. publicly traded companies on top-tier exchanges, NYSE, NASDAQ, you begin to understand what an uplist is as well. So we'd encourage all to look up these terms. This will provide you with some edification that'll make you more powerful, more informed, which will also help you make better investment decisions, as we do not provide investment advice. When you uplist to an exchange, you get a price bump. For speculators, that's a nice thing. You uplist to an exchange, you get a price bump. They walk away with pennies, we keep the pounds. That's short-term thinking. Not very wise. It's not how you make money, actually. Not big money. You make a little money that way. Big money is made when you focus on consequential revenue. And that is our focus. The more important consequential revenue. So we'd recommend and encourage everyone to focus on consequential revenue. That's actually how you grow real value, big value. On the exchanges side, we have talked with Morningstar about exchanges. When we talked to them today, the conversation first started with this section of the conversation started with the investment club that we have on the Thematic Baskets channel. This is where we've got a group of almost 1,000 people that are observing themes, global themes that pop up, whether it's uranium or supply chain issues or new FDA approval on an Alzheimer's drug, whether it's a new GameStop event or pandemic or whatever the case, the semiconductor shortage. These are themes, global themes, and they pop up in real time. Our group there understands now what it means to trade those themes in real time, generate a thematic basket of stocks. We'll soon have crypto, of course. And the issue that we face is that the SEC requires you to have no more than 100 members in an investment club. So with 1,000 people, does that mean that we start 10 investment clubs? Probably not. That might be frowned upon, to say the least. What this means is that we are looking for partners, and we let Morningstar know that we are looking for partners like themselves that we can introduce our investment club to in terms of enabling not only the generation of thematic baskets related to global events in real time, but also one-click basket execution on those components, stocks and crypto. So Morningstar said, well, this is a retail product here, and we don't do many retail products. We don't execute on many individual investment products, and we understood that. But what they did say was that they are in contact with exchanges and institutions that might be interested in this. So we're going to be working with Morningstar on some of the institutions that they serve in terms of them being their customers, but also providing the ability through their institutional customers to enable our investment club members to go ahead as retail investors and engage in one-click basket execution for generating thematic baskets related to global events in real time. And as mentioned before, there is broad demand across the board related to their institutional customers and the ability to generate thematic baskets related to global events. So we're going to give them a few puzzle pieces where we can now work with Morningstar and one or two of their institutional customers in creating a product that will service our investment clubs. Morningstar also asked us if we have been in contact with any exchanges, and we said yes. So we'll be talking with them about thematic baskets on the traditional market side with traditional market exchanges. And then, of course, when we operate on crypto, Morningstar, just as we mentioned in the past with S&P, will be the one to contact exchanges for us on the crypto side, based on thematic baskets they're already introducing to their institutional customers and exchanges. When you look at Morningstar, they can buy 1,000 Q coins, by the way. Their connections are far more powerful. So this is why we are spending the time under the exchanges section talking about Morningstar. Next, we've got IR, PR, and Marcom. Now, we've touched on IR, PR, and Marcom in sections previously here on this call. So the only thing that we're going to mention now would be a question. And that is, what is the most powerful headline a public or private company can issue? That is a rhetorical question. We may turn it into a contest. But the answer to that question will shed a tremendous amount of light on our strategy. And again, it will improve your decision-making ability when it comes to investment vehicles. Next, we have questions from the trader base. Our first question. I assume you have a lot of knowledge and experience on the topic health supplements and anti-aging. I was wondering if you have some routine supplements you personally take and would recommend to others. There's a lot of noise when searching for alpha on this topic. I'm sure you could add value to the life of your investors by sharing some quick recommendations. This is a very good question, and the term alpha actually applies. We never thought about it this way, but that's pretty much what it would be. Alpha on this topic. First, we'd like to say that we do not provide medical advice of any kind. However, what we can say would be that we have talked about supplements publicly. These supplements have been vitamin D, vitamin D3, vitamin K2, omega-3s. We have talked about turmeric and anti-inflammatories. These are things that help boost your immune system and prevent neoplastic cells, cancerous cells, from forming. We have also talked about our collaborators in Space Biosciences. And if you follow along with what we are doing on the scientific and academic side of things with our collaborators, you'll get a deep understanding of how to protect and repair your body, not only in spaceflight, but here on this planet. We are also going to be introducing the world to personalized medicine datasets. These would be datasets that enable an individual to engineer nutrition or a diet. We would also recommend looking up the term nutrigenomics. Question 2, regarding profit sharing between Morningstar and S&P. And we'll just make the change and call this revenue sharing between Morningstar and S&P. And it continues, what does it mean for the IP, the intellectual property? Is the platform owned by S&P and Morningstar, and does this slow or halt the progress from working directly with the financial institutions / hedge funds you spoke of before for more detailed customized baskets? For example, are you locked into Morningstar and S&P's ecosystem? Are you stopped from working with a hedge fund directly unless you use their platform, for example? Well, this all depends on the deal. It depends on the value of the deal. In any case, we are savvy enough to understand what will add a maximum amount of value to stakeholders. So whatever we do, if we turn business down, if we delay a relationship to pursue another relationship, whatever we do, there is a strategy that connects directly to maximizing value for our stakeholders. And value comes in many different forms: health, money, time, relationships. Our focus, of course, is consequential revenue. Question 3. Is the revenue model still sticking to 99 cents per update, given we're moving to shared licensing models with S&P and Morningstar? Yes, we intend to stick with the 99 cent per update, per data source, per row type, per context type, per column type. And that's based on a subscription model that's similar to a SaaS or DaaS, software as a service model, or dataset as a service model. Our current partners, they appreciate that model, and they don't see any other model that would generate more revenue. However, they do have their models in place that they've been using that have proven successfully, and sometimes to operate outside of those models takes a bit of negotiation and a bit of proof, or at least a bit of testing, to become data-driven and understand what the most valuable path would be to take. So we're flexible. All things considered, we're creative and we're flexible. Question 4, do you consider your company as a crypto company or much more an AI company? And which part of it is the most difficult to handle in terms of regulatory or compliance? We are a space biosciences company. Innovations in space biosciences result in products and services in the AI industry, in the crypto industry, in all industries. We are not a crypto company in the classic sense. Our value is far beyond the classic crypto company. And the second part of that question is the most difficult part to handle the regulatory, which is the most difficult part to handle the regulatory and compliance related to crypto or space biosciences or AI. Obviously, it's crypto. Question 5. How will the Space Biosciences division differ from the Thematic Baskets division? Will they run off different chains altogether? If so, how will existing VXV holders benefit? The first part of this question, how will the Space Biosciences division differ from the Thematic Baskets division? They're one and the same. Datasets power every AI and ML operation. In Space Biosciences, we are scientific data engineers. and data scientists. A scientific data engineer is different from a standard data engineer. A scientific NLP engineer is different from a standard NLP engineer, and the same goes for NLU. When you look at space biosciences and the fact that you are dealing with the most complex data related to humans, the human body, human biology, you can then take what you've learned in a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary way and apply it to every industry. The reason that thematic baskets exist is because of our innovation in space biosciences. If you look at an octopus and you look at the head of the octopus, that is the space biosciences unit. When you look at the tentacles, these are our products and services and applications that will apply to separate industries, with each tentacle being an industry. The second part of this question is, will they run on different chains altogether? And the long-term answer to that is yes. The reason for that is space biosciences, as it being the tip of the spear in all of biosciences / life sciences, has very specific needs related to, again, human biology, which is much different than the financial markets, or the legal space for that matter, or the entertainment space. When you look at the requirements for a chain operating in space biosciences, there's also considerations related to data provenance, data governance, data lineage, and data security. So running on our own chain in space biosciences is the wise thing to do. And even wiser would be for all to understand what a net asset value calculation is. These divisions, these companies will be tied together, their valuations. When one company owns a significant percentage of another company that's generating revenue, being spun off to the public, both benefit. The company that owns, for example, 60% of another company that's being floated out there in the public, that's 60% more you have as a company on your books. Which, if you do a calculation, the price of your share or token must factor that when you consider general accounting principles, which is where crypto is headed. This is why regulation exists today, to make sure that crypto companies abide by accounting standards. And one of those accounting standards, of course, is to understand how much you have on your books in terms of assets. And then, of course, you factor that right back into your trading vehicle, the price of your trading vehicle. That's how markets work. So we'll be executing on that, and as mentioned before, our strategy always connects to maximizing stakeholder value. So you can be confident in that for all stakeholders. Question 6. Are you concerned or a part of about this whale wallet accumulating recently? Does it have anything to do with buybacks, and what is your take? Seems like this wallet has nearly 2% of the circulating supply. This is every day in public markets. This is not something we're concerned with. This is a non-issue. When you run a U.S. publicly traded company, when you've got a public vehicle, which we've done before, from the ground up, creating liquidity from zero, you see this every day. You've always got groups out there that are accumulating, repositioning, rebalancing, doing whatever they do, trying to acquire as much of the supply as possible, and then they get run back down. This is just the nature of public markets. And whether or not it has to do with buybacks, we can tell you that that particular wallet does not. Another thing that we can tell you is that we hot swap investors all the time. That's what founders do. That's what founding teams do. When you have got a publicly traded vehicle associated to you, attached, you do as you see fit when you hot swap these investors. Question 7. In the past, there were some arrangements with Colgate and Publicis for Datasets. Any updates for these previous partners? No, there are absolutely no updates. We put those partners on ice. There is no way we are going to take half our engineering team to support a $10,000 a month contract. And that's what we were looking at there. So we move on. We move to quickest path to revenue relationships, and not just any revenue, consequential revenue. Quickest path to consequential revenue. Question 8. I know that buybacks can't be announced before they happen, but is there any plan for how those will be informed? Yes, we intend to inform just as regulators expect, and that's quarterly. Question 9. Could you throw light on how your partnership with LCX has fared and what your future with them is? Well, LCX is an exchange. They are one of the first exchanges that we talked to related to providing thematic baskets. We gave them access to our API, and they were going to connect us with technical leads for the integration. They got busy, and the ball's in their court. Question 10. I'm astounded by the cost to compute and train models, language models. Then also to store the data sets require a lot of storage. As a startup company, are your resources limited? And how then can you stay in the game? And they have that in quotes. Against giants like Microsoft, Nvidia, and Google. Well, it's important to recognize that we lead the game. Check our patents, check our history, check our track record. You can check our patents with U.S. national laboratories, years before Google produced its first language model called Word2Vec, which they in fact modeled based on our model. When you look at language models and using billions and trillions of parameters and processing all of Wikipedia, one thing that groups don't put enough time into is understanding human cognition. When it comes to language models, an understanding of, for example, computational linguistics, computational neuroscience, computational cognition, will give you a better understanding of why you do not need large data sets like that. You don't need billions and trillions of parameters to specialize. That's the opposite of specializing. When you look at targeting verticals within industries, you must use small data sets, targeted models. You can combine these models. You can create models of models, ensembles. And that's what we do. We specialize. We have targeted models. And if you look up some of the latest research in advancements of language models, for example, Google's DeepMind's AlphaFold 2, that is not a large language model in terms of processing all of Wikipedia or all of biomedical data. It's specific to the folding of proteins, and all the optimizations, the thousands or hundreds of thousands of optimizations they've done with that model have been specific to the folding of proteins. And there are plenty of examples like that. You can look up small data sets versus big data sets. You can look up what some government agencies are doing, U.S. government agencies are doing right now, focusing on small data sets. You simply get too much noise. You also are not processing data similar to the way a human might be processing it. A small child can't read all of Wikipedia and then begin making predictions. Context is everything. Question 11. So would it be right to say competitors in this space would be those huge biomedical corporates, Novartis, AstraZeneca, Roche, Though VXV is specific to research around space biosciences, the work and creating a wet lab is to move into that direction of developing and licensing biomedical/drug discovery patents, etc. That's a question. And it continues, and creating legitimacy in this space, biosciences, creates bulletproof legitimacy in the financial markets, legal, and every other area that VXV touches? This is one of the best questions we've been asked, and the answer is precisely. This is a person that understands our deep strategy, the high value strategy, the big money strategy. And speaking of strategy, this is our next section. Strategy. And under strategy, we have a few notes here. One note, and these are not necessarily directly related to one another. They are separate stratagems, you might say. The first is that we do not operate at the speed of any individual's pocketbook or Lambo payments. We operate at the speed of big money, not little money. We are also looking forward to clearing out a few stakeholders, and we'll spend as long as we need to doing so before we go ahead and make the next few legs up here. And on another note, we are offering 100 VXV for the best explanations as to why language models are the tip of the spear in artificial intelligence and machine learning. This has been a contest that we started about a week and a half ago, and we may extend it. We want to get some pretty good answers here. It's not because people have not given us good answers. We want it as many good answers as possible. We will also be offering 100 VXV to anyone that can find a hidden relationship between the term Artemis and space biosciences. Artemis is spelled A-R-T-E-M-I-S. And thirdly, in the context of contests, we are offering 100 VXV to anyone that can explain how much more valuable companies are than the exchanges they trade on, and why. And then next, we are going to remind everyone of the parable of the goose and the golden egg. This is an Aesop fable, and it reads, "There was once a countryman who possessed the most wonderful goose you can imagine. For every day when he visited the nest, the goose had laid a beautiful, glittering golden egg. The countryman took the eggs to the market and soon began to get rich. But it was not long before he grew impatient with the goose because she gave him only a single golden egg a day. He was not getting rich fast enough. Then one day, after he had finished counting his money, the idea came to him that he could get all the golden eggs at once by killing the goose and cutting it open. But then the deed was done. Not a single golden egg did he find, and his precious goose was dead." So there's a few morals to that story, and the first one is, let's bring this home to us here. We are not in the business of cutting the golden goose in half. We're in the business of genetically engineering ganders of geese that lay golden eggs. We are big game hunters, big picture players, and with a steely focus on the long game as we prioritize big returns over small returns. So a focus on consequential revenue should be your number one focus with a company like ours. We are not the typical crypto company, and you wouldn't want us to be. Meanwhile, we're going to let a few trees shake while we spend as much time as we need clearing sell pressure from our books. And in conclusion, we have arranged for third-party backtesting results published to the Thematic Baskets channel. If you take a look at those results, we think you'll be pretty satisfied. And those results are brought to you by Innovations in Space Biosciences. That concludes this call for this week. If you have any questions or comments, you can find us online. Thanks for joining.